Look at this. I got headphones on. I got a mic going. Baby.
If
Huh?
only people could see you now.
Hey, no video. We've gone through this before.
All right,
No
all right,
video.
all right. Welcome to This Commerce Life. This is a podcast aimed at small, medium entrepreneurs focused on commerce. I'm Phil, your host, and Kenny, your co-host, will join us as well. And we're going to talk to you about the world of retail and commerce and how things are changing in the world.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Good
Viren.
morning, sir. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. We're running a little late. Sorry about that. Just
No, it's all good.
chasing finance. That's what I've been doing all morning, chasing finance.
That's okay. That's half the battle, right?
Yeah.
No, what we were going to say to you, because I'd like us to have 45 minutes to an hour. Like, I don't want to rush it just because I think the whole story you have is pretty cool.
No rush. No rush.
Well, no, because you got a hard stop at 10:30, right? And I don't want to rush you're
I
not
did-
going to, you're not going to bypass Loblaws for us. I love you and I know that.
Yeah.
And I think deep down you love me too, but it's not going to happen.
It's
I already know that. I am not more important than Loblaws.
It's just our Loblaws internal team. I can push them a few minutes, but I do have to talk to them about a bunch of stuff. We can jump right into it. The big difference, it's just trade management. Like, I have to talk to finance and the Loblaws team to find out what the heck they're spending and where all the money's going. It's a wild ride in a big company.
It's a wild ride because they just send the debits and they're either vague or vague would be like a treat.
Yeah.
Like, they're just usually a number. You're thinking, that's wonderful. Can someone tell me what that number might be made up of?
Well, Loblaws is pretty direct. We know where they're going, and we're taking this, and thank you very much, right? But with the old ethical bean, I could handle that. The new ethical bean within craft, we live within four coffee brands now, right? That craft sells to any one of the retailers: Passimo, Nabob, Maxwell House, and Ethical Bean.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how a particular sales team has set it up, either they differentiate by brand or they just blend it all. And another aspect of a large company is the debit management, because there's probably hundreds of thousands of them are managed by an outside company. And so between my planning, the Loblaws sales team's planning across four brands and outsourcing it, you really have no idea where the stuff is being put, whether it's being kind of switched around between coffee brands, because the sales team might say, they can horse trade between Ethical Bean and Maxwell House.
Right.
Customer doesn't care, but I'm sure part of what we want to talk about today is, like, how does Ethical Bean exist within this larger company? I run a small, tiny sort of arm's length company within a big one. I only have one lever. It's Ethical Bean, right? So be sure as shit that I'm chasing dollars because it all falls on my P&L at the end of the line. They don't care. They can blend it into, I think we have 1,500 SKUs, right? That's how many craft sells, right? So at the end of the day, if you run
puts and
Loblaws,
takes, right? Yeah.
yeah, puts and takes. And if you run Loblaws, which is, I think, close to $1 billion in sales for craft, right? Like, imagine how big the blender is, right, to try to cut stuff up.
Good Lord.
Well, and how easy for things to get lost, not
To get
seen.
lost, things to get-
And what at the end of the day, as Kraft's going to look at it, if it's $1 billion in, 20% out, it's kind of the number we're shooting for. Doesn't matter where it came from. I don't know.
We're a very, very small percentage of.
I'm sure.
of
But
that.
you could add a nice profitability aspect that some of the other coffee brands that they carry don't.
Yeah, we could.
Right? Max is all price, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
All price. I mean, there's that. You're running that shit is just coming off the trees into the roasters, and out she goes. Like, I mean, there's nothing going on in that one, right?
It's a slightly different process than how we make ethical bean, right?
All tonnage. That doesn't matter. It's just price. Crank it out, move it out.
It is, but that's why they bought us, is we offer a different,
Right.
we're a different clientele. We have a different sort of story, a different execution. But yeah, we can deliver more margin and more, more dollar value per turn for sure. But for us to get to the level where we want to be now, they're like, we are investing more in the brand in terms of marketing and awareness than Lloyd and Kim ever did. Like in 10 years.
Yeah,
Probably,
all in.
no, actually, let me do some quick math. I'll be careful with the numbers. We probably spent last year 4 years worth of marketing for Ethical Being, and slightly different definition of what falls into what category. So that part has been a lot of what interests me, right? Like, how can you take a brand that got to, you know, with your help and all the other retailers' help when you worked at London Drugs, got to a certain level. We have much more longevity and longer planning, right? Like, I would live and die on the P&L monthly, right? Because I had an owner that literally was like right there banging on my door saying, what the fuck is going on, right? Yeah. Whereas now, they can say, well, where do you want to be in 7 years, right? And the amount of
isn't that nice though?
It's nice, yeah. That's the other side, the caveat to what I was just talking about, right? Like, it falls into this labyrinth of planning and finance that, you know, I'm a pretty smart guy. I mean, you're smarter, Ken. You've told me that.
Well, Phil's the smartest one of all of us. So.
Phil's the smartest, but like, I'm a reasonably intelligent guy, right? And I mean, I built the P&L on a small company. Like, I read the stuff and it's like, I start asking questions because I'm also a bit of a contrarian, as you might recall.
Yeah.
I get on big calls and I'm like, who can define this acronym for me, right? And like, I'm on a call with a lot of other intelligent people and they're like, oh, well, and I'm like, why don't we just use English, right? Like,
yeah.
Because it would be a lot simpler. And I'm sure it's like when you're in university, if I'm asking the question and I'm on a call with 10 people, 2 or 3 other people have no idea what's on this piece of paper either.
You're usually not the only one in the room has no clue what we're talking about. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, in a room of 10 at that level, if you're not too sure, you can bet half are probably in the same boat. Yeah. And the other half may know what the acronym means, but have no clue how to use it.
Yeah, fair.
So it's one of those ones that, you know, hey.
And it's no secret, like in a company this big, like the system and the process sometimes gets in the way of what's right for the business, and everybody knows that. And what I've learned we've been talking about this for a long time to sit down and have a chat, but it's been 3 years almost to the day from the acquisition, so it's been a long time now. And you know, some stuff is still being worked out, which I find interesting. I thought it would all be kind of put to bed and filtered through whatever system that Kraft Heinz has. But what it was hard for everyone, my team here, which is about 35, 36 people, like, it was a huge, you know, transformation for us and, you know, upheaval of all the systems and so on. But that company itself, right, was only 2 years off a massive merger of Kraft and Heinz, right? So you know, if we think of what happened to a small company and how challenging it is and how amazing it was in terms of opportunities and awareness and learning, like, they meshed together 2 enormous operations, right?
Right.
And the people there were still coming to grips with all the new ways of being. And I think I've had 3 different presidents in Canada in the 3 years that I've been there. So it took them a long time, and you have to be very aware of how stressful it was for them too, right? Just to get back up and going. And I think everyone here at the Ethical Bean office, where you've been a bunch of times, Ken, we were very, very fortunate through COVID to actually have a very big company behind us, right? Because
for sure.
You know how we would have been able to manage and react and support people with a smaller company, right? It was very, very fortunate, I think. And, you know, I could spend the whole hour complaining about how difficult it is to work for a massive company, but the amount of HR support and the amount of care that they're putting into their people has been amazing, right? Like, the amount of work that we're doing on diversity, on mental health, on a whole bunch of stuff is quite frankly,
right?
Yeah, I mean, you worked for a medium-sized company before, Ken. I worked for a very small one in CPG, but they're doing amazing things, right? They just had a thing yesterday about pets, right? Like they had a whole thing about pet parenting that I was like, this is amazing. They're like, well, we realized a lot of stuff on family, but the whole global workforce is, I don't know, 45,000 people. And it's like, there's a lot of people who don't have kids. And so like, what about them? So they have a whole thing about vets. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Pretty wild.
But you're right. Like you'd never do that in little companies, right?
Well,
like
Phil came from J&J, right? Same worlds, right? It's you've got resources, you've got people. They're just huge.
This might be one of the few phone calls that you could say, "Hey, J&J," and J&J is like tiny compared to. I think that's kind of funny, actually. But
doing other things like 2 Fridays a week or 2 Fridays a month. You're not supposed to book any internal meetings, right? Like 0 meetings internally. To go out to the stores, think about your business, think about projects, and part of that is they're cognizant of the fact that if they didn't do that, you'd spend all day talking to finance and talking to just that they're aware of it.
It's a good mental health day in a sense, in a lot of ways, right? Because it gets you out of doing the mundane shit that to your point, you could get bogged 7 days a week, 24 hours a day doing that and never get out of it. And it's not a fun place to be for most people.
And we're all doing it, right? Like I think I had 4.5 hours in a row yesterday, maybe with one break. It's way more draining than face to face. Like that's not a revelation to anyone, but like I was tapped out, and then it was 2:00 in the afternoon, right? It's hard to pull off, but so I don't know if you had any specific questions. I can just keep rambling on, but I don't know if anybody really wants to listen to that.
Well, the whole point of having you on was for this, because we really wanted to have you sort of walk through, the starting up of the ethical being, how you guys got to a point where someone of that size was actually interested in you, and then what are the changes? Like what happens when a behemoth literally comes in and takes a little guy? Like, because when you guys got bought by Kraft, you and I had discussions, and you worry because large companies have a tendency to meddle, which causes nothing but grief because they have no clue on small. And the smarter ones say, listen, you know what? You're a little unique. Just run. We'll watch, and you're going to learn our systems, but you can do your thing.
So I'll go back to the story, and you know it relatively well because we work together.
You want to introduce them first to each other? People know who we're talking to.
Do it.
So your positions I'll never get anyway. So Viren Malik is on the show today. Viren was with Ethical Bean, which is a small local coffee company in Vancouver, roaster, and then sold obviously all their products through retail. I got to know Viren years ago because we listed Ethical Bean Atlanta Drugs, got to be friends. Sometimes I think I like Viren more than he likes me, but that's okay. That's a whole different podcast. But we've got pretty close. And what I really wanted to have Viren on for today was what we just sort of finished talking about, is that Viren took a really small company from an entrepreneur who had a lot of interesting ways to do things, but a typical entrepreneur, right? And then got this company to a size, obviously, where someone like a Kraft notices it and says, you know what, shit, we've got these coffee brands in our portfolio. Be really cool to have something like this now in our portfolio. And I think what I've loved when, Viren and I have talked after the acquisition was all of a sudden how resources opened up, whether it was financial, human, whatever it was. And then some of the challenges of that too, when you went from a world where, maybe you could make decisions all day and change them tomorrow morning to where the decision of today may not get implemented till 6-8 months down the road and there is no change in it. So Viren, it's one of that. I think what would be interesting is sort of your story first, how it happened, because you're gonna have to go Cole's nose because I know you have to bugger off fairly quickly, or we can actually pick this up at another time and finish the podcast, but just that, and then maybe walk us into the transition into from ethical to Kraft ethical.
So, I mean, I didn't do it all myself. I got to say that first and foremost, right? We had great ownership who founded the company. They were very entrepreneurial and very creative in terms of how they position the brand. I had a bit more knowledge of CPG and sales and so on. So it took a long time to get to the point where we were on anyone's radar in terms of acquisition, probably about 10 years. And then the calls started to come in, mostly from venture capitalists, right, who wanted to just, put some money in, help us grow, and then flip 3-4 years after. That model wasn't all that appealing to myself or to Lloyd, the owner, because let's be frank, right? Venture capitalists just put $5 million in 10 companies. And if one of them can sell for 25, 40 million, they got their 5 million for their investors. And you just have some asshole on the board of directors that you have to report to, basically. I mean, I'm generalizing, right? But
no, but that's probably pretty fair.
It definitely shifts the way a company's sort of energy and sort of the HR piece, right? Because you have someone there whose sole purpose is to flip the company at some point in time or get the buyback after whatever the term of the investment is. So basically it came down to, I was this COO. I started as director of sales. When I was in a position to run the whole thing, it basically, for a small company, it comes down to like, what's the definition of success, right? And for a while, and when you and I worked together, it was about growth, right? So we grew with your stores probably to the max, right?
Right.
I'll say we have pushed it a little past then since you left, Kenny, But
well, I would say there's just more stores, and you're just a bigger brand now, so it's really got shit to do with anything outside of stuff that was not out of our control anyway.
Oh man!
Imagine if we were there. Let's go down that path.
That for sure is another.
Move on.
Then it was like, where do you go as a Western Canadian company that has great awareness and sales in the West, limited distribution in the East, and again, you and I spent some time in the U.S. at trade shows, so it became growing into the U.S. And that was like, there were two goals to that. Obviously, it was just growth of the brand and awareness, and anyone in packaged goods, and that's all I've done for sort of 25 years. In Canada, like the US market is very seductive, right? Like it's amazing, it's huge, it's 12 times the size of Canada. And if you have relative success here, the markets are not identical. I think many companies have made that mistake, like Target coming up here, and even us, our tiny little brand going there, we had to learn some stuff, right? Like I think the US is kind of like 6 different markets, right? Like we have more in common with people in the Northwest than someone in Seattle does with someone in Miami, right? So you can't have this blanket marketing or blanket sort of positioning and expect to do well down there in certain channels. The other goal of growing into the US was we buy all our coffee in US dollars. Both our bags and our beans come in US. So like 96% of the input cost of my product is bought and sold in US dollars. I don't know where people are who are listening to this, probably all over the world, hopefully, because you guys are so amazing, your breadth of connection. But the Canadian dollar fluctuates. So the other thing was grow into the US so we can internally hedge ourselves and not have to live and die on both commodity and currency markets. And then as that rolled along, we started to get more interest from people. They saw the brand expanding in the US, but quite honestly, it just became the ownership's time to move on, right? And when it was their time, like it wasn't craft calling. We would get calls from people, but like I said, it was mostly from the investment community. It was more a decision that it was their time to move on for various reasons. And so we engaged with an investment banker to go and find us some prospective buyers. And that process took better part of a year and a half, just positioning the company properly, positioning the presentation, doing all the due diligence in our own sort of accounting and other ways, such that we were prepared to go through this very, very grueling process, right? In the end, we had 4 suitors that were very interested among the sort of 20 or 30 that we looked at. And that was a decision that was made internally on what type of company the owners would feel comfortable putting their brand into that environment or selling to. And I thought that was very, very cool that the owners were that invested and
like they actually gave a shit.
they ever gave.
I like Lloyd. I mean, because Lloyd's an eccentric guy, but I like Lloyd. I do. I think Lloyd just, I mean, God bless, he did a neat thing, right?
Well, the money was of course a huge motivator, but it wasn't
For sure.
Take anything and off they go, out the door they go. So, that then took another year of negotiating and presenting and so on and so forth to all the various companies. And for me, that was very, very interesting, very, very difficult, and but also a great learning experience, right? To be able to understand the complexity and the level of detail that you have to do to move a company, for a significant amount of money for some, but relatively a smaller amount for a huge international company, right? But
I mean, they can buy you out of petty cash, to be blunt. You know what I mean? It's not. This is a big purchase, but they're dealing with brands that are huge.
Oh yeah, but a lot of detail has to go into that, even
for sure.
Not small for a company that large. So that was very, very interesting. And then, I'll just kind of go into how the transition went a little bit, right? But the most important part to me was like, I had a great team of people here who were supremely helpful in getting us to the level to have that transaction go through. And the hardest part for me as the person running this company was like, you couldn't tell people up until a certain point, right? And like, I try to pride myself in hiring good people and people that can learn and you can learn from. They're not idiots, right? Like they knew something was going on. Like some dude just shows up and is in the boardroom with Lloyd and I for like 5 hours for a couple of months. Like it's pretty hard not to know. Yeah. And then one of the funniest parts of the whole thing was when Kraft came in for their 10th meeting or whatever, and they came out and so on, and we were getting very close to closing. Everyone has to sign in, just like at every office, and we have a food manufacturing facility, so people sign in. There was like 8 of them came in, signed, reason to be here, Lloyd, Viren, and Kraft, and they're all wearing Kraft shirts, right? And then one of them afterwards, when we were even closer, is like, do you think they know it was us? And I'm like, I'm not.
Are you joking?
I think it might have been, maybe, yeah.
They're not idiots, right? And you all were wearing Kraft T-shirts, and so I'm pretty sure that a few people in the office
might have clued in.
But yeah, the people part was really important, and to your point earlier, Ken, like we were a brand that they could not create in the company that they are. And there's nothing wrong. Yeah. Like we have amazing brands at Kraft, like peanut butter and ketchup and Kraft. Like the numbers, and you probably saw a little bit when you bought them, but I see all of it now, and it's absolutely
huge,
mind-boggling, right?
Yeah, they're huge.
So what I told the team is like, yes, that we're now part of a much larger company, and yes, they have brands that are iconic and have been around forever, but like the only reason they bought Ethical Bean is because they couldn't do it on their own, right? So, look everyone in the eye, understand that we're here because they need us, right? They're here because they couldn't build it themselves. And there's a lot for all of us to learn, right? And I'm still learning, right, about finance and about how some of the stuff is set up. And so a few of my original team left for various reasons. Some was opportunity-based. Some they weren't quite as comfortable working for a massive company. And that's totally cool, right? But for all the people here, it's like I continue to push them to like you can learn a lot from a massive company like this. And there are some amazing people working there. Some of the marketing stuff that they've done or we've done, I still have the we thing, I have to do stuff. But some of the marketing stuff that's come out of Kraft over the last year has been amazing, right? Like you may or may not have seen it, right in the middle of COVID. Puzzles and Dungeons and Dragons and card games, like everyone's going through the roof. They created a puzzle that was Heinz ketchup, and it was just red. Like it was just red, like entirely. And they sent it out to people, and it was limited edition, right? Sign up. And they won like I can't remember the name of that advertising award, but they won a bunch of them, right? Because it was like brilliant. Like people are sitting at home, and like you can do the, I don't know what, puzzle of an espresso machine or a Maserati or something like that. But it was all red.
That's awesome.
That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
And then they came out with some of the other ones too, like ice cream flavored, an ice cream that's craft dinner flavored. Like, I don't know, just all sorts of
Right.
Right. Then not weird, interesting stuff. And you have a lot of resources, thinking about singular brands, right? That's the way everything is built at Kraft Heinz. Like there's a coffee part and there's a instant meal part and a condiment part, and they break it down to brand level. So you have a lot of energetic people thinking only about a singular brand, and they come up with some pretty wicked cool creative stuff. It's neat.
I guess the interesting thing too is it puts you, like, ethical being, before you were with a big company, you were probably having some pretty interesting conversations with retailers, but there were probably things that you wanted to be able to do, or conversations you want to have about placement and things like that, that getting into craft, all of a sudden now you've got size, right? Like, any kind of like pie in the sky sort of things, all of a sudden you're like, no, you know what? Like now we've got Ethical Bean, which is a kick-ass brand, right? And guess what? I've also got all these other brands that put a lot of power behind me. So now you've got to listen to what I'm trying to show you.
Who's not taking the craft call? Like in terms of retail, like who's not taking a craft call? I mean, I wasn't a big fan of craft, but I still took the calls.
Yeah.
Still craft.
Listen, I left J&J, and like, you called retailers back, and all of a sudden they didn't call you back as quick, right? And you're kind of like, why? What happened? What I did? Oh,
yeah.
I
now you're a nobody like the rest of us.
I'm not a 500-pound gorilla anymore.
Right.
Damn it. I'm a regular human.
Have you noticed that, Baron? Like what happens to that? Like, I'm assuming the relationships you had are always good because you're very friendly, but this had to be a whole different.
Yeah. And there's a couple ways to look at that, right? If you think about it like a large company buying a small company, there's a lot of ones that have not gone well, right? And then I think it wasn't to you because I think you were gone at the time on the buying desk, but people would say like, "Oh, holy shit, Beer and Craft," and I'm like, "Well, how are your sales of Ben and Jerry's, right? How are your sales of Burt's Bees? How are your sales of Annie's Pasta?" And they're like, "Oh, fuck, they're great." I'm like, "Exactly, right." So that's where my mind goes, as opposed to. Can't remember the cereal blend that.
Well, you could go Kashi, you
like
go Balance Bar Zone, but those were in the early days
Yeah.
of these transitions from multinationals buying small companies, not understanding that you can't. It's a square and a round peg, right? If you're going to buy a small company like you guys and a natural play, pardon me, you got to let them be.
Yeah.
You could impose the rules because you're dad. You get the rules of the house, but let the kids play in any room they want. You just sort of control a little bit of it. But the problem with Kashi, for example, is Kellogg's went in and tried to redo Kashi.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, if Kashi had been left alone, they probably would have been fine.
Yeah, and I think there has been some amazing wins in terms of the scale and the access to buyers and the access to larger programs that open up shelf space and advertising opportunities and so on. Like, I mean, again, you just follow the money and we have lots of it to throw around with
But it makes a difference though, obviously, right?
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. However, what I didn't realize, and it was about a year and a half into it, it became a very clear reality to me, was that, and I'll go back to when I worked construction, and my foreman, Leon, had a shirt that said, "If you're going to run with the big dogs, you can't be like a puppy." Right. And it's like, so we were running with the big dogs, and you know what happened? I got delisted in a bunch of places.
Aww.
Not anything Ethical Bean did, because Kraft was doing some stuff, taking price on other things. And the entire value of my portfolio was worth less than the 2% price increase on some other much larger categories. And I was like, but And they were like, yeah, sorry, Darren, when it went really well over here, here's the other side. You're gone, and we're taking price on XYZ. Overall, we're winning. And I'm like, but that's like 8% of all my sales. And they're like, yeah,
Well,
sorry, right?
Yeah. For us, it's puts and takes.
Yeah.
I know that your world just took on a whole lot of water. You lost your front tire, but hey,
What it's
that's
tough.
tough.
And like, I always like to learn stuff is for me 6 years ago, that would have been, it still was horrible. Like, I'm still talking about a year and a half, fucking sucks. But like, it would have been so impactful to the business, and it would have triggered a whole bunch of other stuff. Like
potentially it's crippling.
But the next time relisting windows come around with said retailer, I'm not going to say who it is.
That's fine.
We'll be right back in there.
Right.
Like, we're shuffling a deck of cards. They have 52 cards, and those are all the craft brands. We got put out on this deal, this hand, but like, you know what? We'll be right back in there next time, because the contact to that buyer is there weekly. Whereas, to your point, Phil, I could have been, if it wasn't for the fact that we were in East Van, 14 years ago, I would have called Ken 1,000 times and I wouldn't have heard back from him, right? So,
Yeah, he's a jerk like that. Seriously.
yes, I know.
Wow, really? I stood by these guys, jackass. Mostly because they were East Van, but that's a different story.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were working for Ken. I don't know. It's just
whatever. Anyway, it's interesting. So go back to sort of the staffing thing, because I'm always curious about that, because the beauty of someone like, I think Lloyd and Kim was, I don't think their intent was ever to build something and probably sell it to a multinational. I mean, in the back of anybody's head when they start companies, ultimately, I think you're thinking of selling someday. But I think they actually liked what they were doing. They had a cool thing. And it maybe did get time. And I think maybe they realized that if there was a ceiling, it was probably going to be them, right? Because you can take a company to a certain point, and then you do need
to take that next leap, the amount of capital investment that
exactly. And did you want to do that at that point of your life? You're probably financially in a good spot, a little bit older. I mean, we did our thing. As long as someone doesn't screw up this baby, give it to someone else.
I'm not worried about them at all. Let's just say that.
Exactly. And that's perfect for them, because you know what? That's what they did. Good on them. But you did have, I mean, I think, like, from my perspective, I think when this happened, you and I had talked about it too, is that for me, I don't like the larger companies, and to be swallowed would have probably bothered me. I mean, I would have probably done what you did. You stick it through for a short time, see what it was, see how it plays out. Like, you've gone 3 years, which is pretty impressive. And you don't seem to be ready to jump, which is really cool. But which also shows that craft has been not that bad as a parent, because they're letting you do your own things. Your staff, though, how were they? I mean, I know some of the people. I mean, I knew a lot of you people. I know some who left probably once they knew the announcement, but before it was really done, and probably jumped maybe a bit too early. I'm sure there's others that were thinking, like, what does this mean to us? Like, what happens to my great little company? And I walk in and I know everybody. Now this monster is going to take me, and I'm not going to know anybody.
Well,
whatever.
You're right. Some did jump a little too early, I think. Yeah, 2 people in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's their own decision. And, whenever anyone leaves an organization that I'm in charge of, right? Like, you basically have two or three options. You can be all pissed off and bent out of shape because you're losing someone great, or you can celebrate with them and say, well, I gave you experience and knowledge and learning such that you're taking it somewhere else that's better for you.
Awesome.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can't pay you as much as you're getting somewhere else, or the learning opportunity has come to a bit of an end or a dead end. Then go for it. I mean, I'll be your competitor, I'll be your friend or whatever. So off you go. So yeah, I think a couple of people could have learned a little bit more that would have been very useful to them professionally, but that was their decision. And they're both in great places now. There was a lot of discussions and both in groups and in person with me for people who were concerned what's going to happen and so on. And that took probably a year and a half or more for people to settle and to understand, right? And, quite understandably, and I think it's a normal process, although I've only been through this recently once, at this level in a company anyway, where people were frustrated, right? Because the new process is a lot more onerous than what we did before. Right? And so as a person in a leadership position, right, you have to listen, you have to help them, you have to give them the tools to make their individual role or scenario a little bit better. But you also know me, Ken. I got to a certain point, right, where I'm like, look, right, I'm going to listen to you, but now I'm going to listen to you for about 5 minutes. And if you don't have a solution or a way this is going to get better, like, I don't have time for you, because I deal with people at the head office 10 times more than anyone here. And if you think they're just sitting around looking for ways to cook up ideas that make ethical beings life more difficult, like, they are doing way more than all of us here within the system that we have to figure out. So, like, it gets to a point where you care about people and their state of mind, but it's like, we have to get to solutions, right? That's what we're getting paid for.
Right.
We've been given the luxury of not being part of it entirely, and we're allowed to do stuff. We've kept some autonomy. Are we in the system? We have to be, because our EPCs are part of the mother tree that it was an asset purchase, not a share purchase, right? So we are part of the whole. We're not a subsidiary, right? So,
No, you are owned by Kraft. You're it. Yeah.
Well, if it was a share deal, we could have stayed as ethical being,
Right.
But it was an asset purchase deal. So, like, all our paychecks come from Kraft, all the HR, and so we'll have to understand that level of integration may have been a little bit more of a difficult road for us to go, but we're there now, right? Like, we can't untangle it. Trust me, I've thought about it in the moments, right? Things aren't happening as quickly as I wanted them to, but, like, this is where we exist now. There's amazing things coming in the future if we do it right. What happened with Lloyd and Kim ended on August 18th, 2019. Like, that's it.
It's long gone, man.
Yeah.
It's gone. And if you don't prepare yourself for the next chapter or whatever, right? Like, it's going to be a lot harder for you. We're blessed with selling an amazing product, right? Still, although the commodity cost of coffee is quite high now,
right?
Get back, every pound of coffee we sell is, it's doing good for people in the producing communities, and we can't get away from that entirely, right? So.
And they've let you hang on to that type. So they really haven't. I mean, outside of, I get obviously the processes systems, but they're still allowing you to run.
We'll always be fair trade. We'll always be organic. Aaron DeLazar still does all the buying. The
still there.
Still here.
That's awesome.
We do roast occasionally in another facility when we're over capacity here, but that's all our green. That's all his roast profiles, right? Everything is still controlled by us, right? And I've had to, there were some hard learnings, right, in terms of forecasting and aggressive budgeting and so on, which I love the enthusiasm and the passion for the brand, but we just have to be very careful, and you know it well, because I know you're a coffee guy. Phil, I don't know if you're a coffee drinker or not, but it's
Love
like
coffee.
It just has to be treated differently than condiment and stuff like that. Like, the movement of inventory through our warehouses and customer warehouses has to be monitored in a way that Kraft wasn't, because their other products don't require it, right?
Right.
It took me a while to dig into the system and figure out where we were missing, and we fixed that, right? So our on-hand inventory in the big warehouse is 6 weeks right now. So we're pumping it out to the customers in great shape, and
nice fresh product. Then that's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we had to shift a few things, and I got carried away to the topic we were discussing earlier, that you can get any meeting, you can turnkey this into the biggest retailers. I'm like, I'm a sales and marketing guy, right? I'm the COO now, and I have been, but, like, I was like, fuck yeah, let's go, like, everywhere. Yeah. And we got ahead of ourselves a little bit, right? And that was just genuine enthusiasm for the brand by Kraft and by me, and so we retooled a little bit on the system side, and we're in a great spot right now. So,
what's the growth been like since the sell? Have you exploded more into the States? Canada gotten bigger? You can tell me what you can tell me. You don't have to give me, whatever you can share.
I'm just cutting it up in so the US we've doubled for sure, right? all of the U.S. is controlled by Kraft Heinz U.S. So I'm just basically like a consultant to them.
Right.
So they change the packaging. I don't know. This is like what our bag looks like in the U.S. So it's
So not a ton different.
Different though.
different. And but yeah, so they put us into Publix, Walmart, Kroger in about 4 months. So like we went from about 1,800 doors to 6,000, right? Like in very, very quick.
That's fast, eh?
Yeah.
And so they've pulled back a little bit, and they're starting to get a little bit more grassroots in terms of the marketing, because we're still unknown largely, like 100% in the US.
Right.
Canada, I think we were like 30 and then a little bit 30 and then 40 over the 2 years. This year it's tapered off a little bit just because there's
what it is.
Right. And so we expanded heavy into some of the customers, and there's always a bit of contraction if you got too many SKUs. But year over year, we're probably flat this year, but that's Xing out all the US and food service that I've lost to COVID. So the growth has been there for sure. Right. And the ability, we're running out of time because I do have to jump off. The ability to analyze the business with the teams that they have in place in terms of consumption and analytics is unbelievable, right? Like we were kind of like finger to the wind before because I couldn't afford Nielsen numbers and stuff. Now we have access to everything, right?
Yeah. Now you've got too much data. It's not that there's any such thing, but you know what I mean? There's so much there.
Well, the bump charts and it's wild, right? But
it's cool though.
It's the business is so data driven that if you aren't on that, you're kind of probably wandering down the wrong street, right? So.
Wow.
Okay. Well, it took us a year to get to, or a year and a half of bugging you to get to this point. And then of course you screwed up the time and didn't give me the full hour like I asked you. But that's okay. I'm used to you. I know how you play.
I'm gonna be polite because I appreciate the opportunity.
You're so full of shit, and that's fine. I still love you.
We can do it again.
I think that's one thing I'd like to do, because I think what we talked about is cool, but there's a lot of really cool story behind it. And I think for a lot of small companies, it's really sometimes the mentality of what you're trying to do. It's funny, we had Patrick Higgins on last night, and we were talking about the same thing you talked about, how different the States is versus Canada, how many Canadian companies look at it and think 10 times, 12 times, we should just go, not understanding that it's 6 or 7 different countries, not one, because each region is different and your distribution models are different, et cetera. So I think in some ways I'd like to really go down those paths, maybe on another chat with you.
I'd love
if you could find time. But it would be something kind of cool, because I think it's just interesting. And the fact he's still stuck around and being able to manage through craft, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Well, I've only worked for 2 brands for the last 25 years, right? Whistler and Ethical Bean. So whenever I interview someone, and I stole it from my wife Janet, right? And you interview someone, you go through the nuts and bolts, and then you say, what's your superpower, right? And it throws people off every time. They're like, what, like X-ray vision? I'm like, no, like in a work sense. Like
X-ray vision.
I don't
That's
care.
Cool.
You can fly. If you can't sell coffee, it doesn't really matter. Right?
Yeah.
But mine is loyalty, right? Like I'm super loyal, right?
Yeah.
And Ethical Bean has done amazing things for me professionally, financially, and for my family. And I do think, right, there is still a lot of work to do for us to get this brand positioned properly within a mega corporation like Ben and Jerry's and like some of the, like we're almost there. We've done some things well. We've learned a lot, but I want to position the brand to be in the best spot for success, because it's a great brand, right? It's awesome, and we have the opportunity with a few sort of tweaks and dial-ins here and there to really crush it and like make it sing, right? So that's what keeps me going when I'm battling, resourcing and pack and and all this stuff, right? Like I have some interesting conversations. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Save them for another day.
Save it for another day.
Yeah.
Save them for another day. That's
Baron,
awesome,
thank you for joining us. We'll get you off so you can go to your meeting. But thanks for being here. We'll send you some options because we'd love to bring you back on.
Oh,
I do feel like there's a whole nother conversation that could happen here.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool to have. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But we'll put the links on for Ethical Being on the podcast links.
Your
if
LinkedIn
someone wanted
as
to
well.
find you or talk to you, maybe understand a little bit more how
Happy
the
to.
world works, how do they reach you? LinkedIn?
Just through LinkedIn, yeah, it's fine. Or email me, Darren@ethicalbeing.com.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Can you come by for coffee sometime? You know where to find
Buddy,
me.
I got to get out of this house, okay? I haven't left this house in 18 months, 19 months. And I know where you are. Trust me. It's all good.
Yeah,
I will definitely come down.
okay, take care.
Okay, take care, buddy.
All right,
Have a
take
good
care,
meeting.
Ryan.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
thanks.
pleasure.
Good job, bud.
Bye.
It's a cool story. I wish we had more
That's
time,
cool. Yeah.
right? Because it's just, like even when you started with Lloyd, they were not a big company. I mean, they were, just typical entrepreneurs, right? I mean, you do what they can, and you're just busting doors. And Vieren's a go-getter. You can tell, like, he just loves the selling aspect and stuff. But he's definitely turned into a whole different person. So it's definitely much more of a management, much more of all that stuff. And he was doing that even with Ethical, obviously. But I'm sure Kraft provided a whole ton of systems, etc.
He seems a little. I think I would have been interesting to meet him when he was younger, because he seems to have kind of that little bit of vinegar edge.
Oh, he's full of piss and
that,
vinegar.
yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like that's totally him. But it's funny because that's what I liked about him. Like, even having meetings with him, like, we get into arguments and, just like it was, but I really liked Viren. I think he was a very interesting fellow. He had a different way of looking at things, an interesting way to look at things. And I just loved what they were trying to do. And I love the local. They were, at that point they were a small East Van company, but they were getting shit done, and they were trying different things, and he wasn't scared to try. He's a bright guy, right?
They're cool.
It's a cool story, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those stories what I like about him more than anything. Because I'll be frank, when the transaction happened, I told myself, fuck, man, what are you going to do? Like, you can't work for Kraft. Like, you can't, man. There's no way you're going to be able to work for someone like that. Right. He goes, well, I've got to do it for at least the year, see what it's like. Yeah. But I think what he's probably learning is sort of what he alluded to. And that's why I want to get more into it, is that, as cool as small companies are, even like the ones we work for, is once you start putting systems in, once you start putting procedures in, as ugly as it feels, because it's rules and regs and shit like that, that's the stuff that allows you to grow, because it plugs up all the holes that leak the most water collectively, not individually, right? And I think he's probably noticed that, is that, like, all of a sudden he's got money, man. You want to go in a list? Yeah, go.
Well, it's like the sweet spot almost is, and when J&J, when we were Pfizer and we got bought by J&J, and J&J put J&J, Pfizer, and the Tylenol guys, McNeil all together into the same company. It took us almost 18 months to find a normal stride, and probably like 2.5 years, 3 years before everything was kind of like flowing.
But
right?
it has to. There's three different companies with three different ways of looking at the world.
Yeah.
3 days of three different ways of pushing paper through a system.
Yeah.
Like, people don't think of that. There's so many changes, right? And I was, because I did know a bunch of the people at Ethical. And one thing, because I know Viren well enough, is that he does worry about his people. Like, he doesn't want, like, and I think Lloyd would have probably been, but just as adamant, is that I don't want people hurt in this.
Mm-hmm.
If this is going to happen and you guys are going to take us, we can't leave carnage behind. Like, we got to protect our people.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like Kraft was more than happy to play with that, which is, again, pretty impressive. I mean, I'm actually kind of impressed how they've managed this, to be very frank with you.
It's a great brand. It's a great
but
brand.
You know what big companies are like.
Great things with it.
Yeah, but big companies have a tendency to actually bury brands if they're not careful.
And I think that if we worked hard, we could probably find a whole whack of examples. But truthfully, I think the ones that we named, like Ben and Jerry's, like ethical, right, are ones that really stand out, right? All the other ones really didn't go that well.
Most don't.
There's a lot, the whitewater ones, none of those have really gone, I think,
because the intent is different, right?
Yeah.
When the intent is to basically go in, increase revenue, drop costs.
Yeah.
I mean, typically that's human carnage that sort of flows out of that. How do you build culture when, if you don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow morning in the organization? It just doesn't really, to me, it's not conducive to it, right? It just, and again, that's why I was pretty impressed with how Kraft managed this. Yeah. And people who know me over the years know that I'm not a huge fan of Kraft. I didn't like dealing with them when I was a buyer. I didn't give a shit about their brands, even though I needed a bunch of them, obviously. But I was not a huge fan because they played in a different world. They dictated to you what you could do, and I used to hate that. I thought, well, screw you. This is my company, not yours.
I was smiling awkwardly because I was that buyer who cut off a big brand at the knees. We thought it was one of the pharmaceutical guys who didn't come to play. Yeah. And so I had something in my category that I didn't need it. So we cut the entire lineup out. So I felt for him when he was talking about that, because I remember
I've done it too, buddy.
I just remember making the phone call, right? And the guy I really liked that guy too, right? And poor guy was like, wait, you're doing what?
You can't do that.
You can't do that. I'm like, I can. And then, and then you're kind of like, the grit inside of you, like we're pretty nice people, but neither of us, we can be mean if we need to be, right? And I was like, don't fucking tell me what I can and can't do. Like, I know these categories as well as you do, right? So don't treat me like an imbecile. Like I'm not a pawn in somebody's game. I said I could give up these categories as part of the negotiating play. So you're gone.
So I've done that for you. And I said, it's not personal.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not blaming you, and I'm not mad at you. Your company made this decision. You delivered the message. Well, now I get to deliver my message. Yeah. And my message is, I don't care. Yeah. But you can't do that. Nobody else is going to do that. Well, I'm happy for everybody else. They can do whatever they damn well please. I don't give a shit.
I don't care.
Right. And there's, and I'm sure you got this, I mean, my longevity was a little longer in the position I was in. So I made a couple of those moves. I had to eat crow on a few of them because
sometimes that happens.
You know what, my best one, because people who listen will know, I was so pissed at Kraft. Like it wasn't Kraft, it was Heinz. I was so fucking mad at Heinz, right? And it was I shouldn't have been mad at them. I was buying stuff offline from the States, and you can't bring Heinz ketchup into Canada because there's trademark and copyright laws between the two countries, right, because the recipes are different. I didn't give a shit. Well, Heinz did. So we got the letters. I had to. So at that point,
I have to give a shit.
Yeah, well, okay, but you know what? Fuck you, man. I'm discontinuing Heinz ketchup. That's it. It's gone. So I discontinued. I think I brought in Almer's or Del Monte or one of those brands because there was an alternative.
Yeah.
Well, that turned out to be not a great move. It would have worked a couple years later when Heinz pulled out of Canada. And people were all over that, but I was a little on the early side, so I had to relist it. I was not happy, but okay, that's fine. You gotta do that. But yeah, it was the same thing. It's don't tell me what I can and cannot do.
Yeah,
I'll do whatever I damn well please. These are my stores, my customers. That's it.
I got.
Yeah, and then basically get it back at you because how'd that work out for you, Einstein? Well, not that well. But then there's a bunch of others, like in Tavir's point, it's not personal. They're not. It's a game. And sometimes you just get caught in the cog of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And he'll pull out. I'm sure he'll get his listings back. You can tell he's persistent.
Yeah, he doesn't even seem worried about it, honestly.
No, because I know I think again, if this was 3 years ago, he's worried. Because
because
now
like
now
for
it's a
little
big
companies,
deal.
It's a big deal, right? Like
you lose an 8%, 10%
like,
company.
Holy fuck, right? Like,
I mean, that's
a handful of jobs.
Well, that could be catastrophic. That's your buying power.
Yeah.
That's people. Like that's a big hit.
Yeah.
Big hit.
Yeah.
Right. But again, when you're with Kraft, maybe you can weather those storms, or with a larger company, you can.
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting.
Yeah, we were glad to get him on. We're sorry it's a bit short today, but we'll
have him back on in the new year.
And there'll be more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, buddy. Okay. Have a wonderful weekend.
I might talk to you. Oh, somebody shut the recording now. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for
That's just for Mark, so that we've said goodbye to our people and we didn't cut you off. Have a wonderful weekend.